Well, hello everybody. Thank you ever so much for tuning in to this quick video or tutorial. In my last video, I made some images of some old growth forest in pretty awful light, to be honest. And rather than just give up for the day, I decided to photograph those scenes and then try to overexpose the background to the point where we just have more or less graphic lines. So in this example here, you can see this is in quite harsh light, but I've decided to really bring up the shadows and the highlights to the point where we just have these graphic lines. And I think in this case it worked quite well. Some of the other images perhaps not so much. And a lot of people were asking or saying that they quite enjoyed the black and white versions. Some people didn't like the black and white versions. Some people like the color versions or preferred color. So with that in mind, this is the raw file of the image I just showed you. As you can see, it's quite underexposed. It's not a big deal. As I've said many times, with the GFX system and the Hasselblad, with those large sensors, you have a huge amount of dynamic range. I think the Hasselblad is at 17 stops of dynamic range from pure highlights all the way down to blacks. So the reason why it is underexposed is because I've exposed for the highlights. You'll notice that there are very few clipped highlights here, and that's because I've exposed for them. If I had exposed for the shadows, then everything behind there would have been overexposed. So with that in mind, all we have to do is just bring up the exposure slider. And you notice that it has introduced some more overexposed areas, but they're very easy to deal with. We can just bring down the highlights and the whites, like so. The image is quite blue and it does look a bit flat. So we'll bring in some yellow. And one of the reasons why I ended up processing in black and white is because colors are just a little bit difficult to handle when you're dealing with dynamic range like this. The colors, I find it very difficult to get the right colors. We can bring the vibrancy down, that helps. We can introduce a little bit of magenta, but then I find that the leaves start to look too magenta. If you go back the other way, they look too green. So there's this really hard, fine line between what's believable and what just looks garish to my eyes anyway. Right, we've got the basis for our black and white, and all I'm doing here is just playing with contrast. So we'll bring the blacks down as far as they'll go. We'll bring the whites up as far as they go, which we've already pretty much done. And now we're going to convert this to black and white. And you can see already, as soon as we go to black and white, it brings out more of the graphic details of the image rather than the color. I think the color is overpowering. Black and white has this wonderful way of just turning something into the graphics rather than distracting you with color. Let's bring the blacks up a bit more. And that is pretty much it. Now, for this image, I'd like to make it even more graphic. I'd like to make these trees stand out a bit more, and I'd like to overexpose the background even more. So I'm going to very quickly show you what I did in the image that I showed in my video. It doesn't have to be that accurate. We're just going to go into the masks here, grab a brush. I'm going to turn the auto mask off. Everything's at 100%. And I'm just going to quickly paint these trees here. Same with this one here. I'm trying to be careful not to introduce too many highlights, and you'll see why in a minute. That one there, and I think that might do it for now. And also, I'm going to paint this shaded foreground here, like so. Okay, now I'm going to turn on the auto mask, and I'm just going to refine this ever so slightly. Like so. Let's go along the edge there. Doesn't matter if we overlap a little bit, we can always go back. If it looks a bit odd, we can always go back and just erase that section. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert that, duplicate and invert. And we'll just get rid of some of these sections here. Just make the brush a bit bigger. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, first thing I'm going to do is go down and use the dehaze slider, like so. We're really brightening up the background there. And the dehaze is great because to my eye, it gives scenes, adds depth. If you have a contrasty foreground and a somewhat slightly hazy background, then that adds depth. We don't want to do it too much. And if you want to erase some of that, what we can do is we can grab the erase, we have the erase brush here, and we could just bring the flow down ever so slightly and just start painting these sections here so that it's adding a bit more contrast. And I've covered this in other videos where you have this, you know, things start off really contrasty when we look at a foreground, and then as you slowly go back into the background, things become less contrasty. So that's what gives it the depth. And then the foreground here, okay, we've got the foreground. What we're going to do now, I'm just going to zoom in ever so slightly to, let's go to 50%. And what I'm going to do now is just bring up the whites and bring down the shadows, and also add a bit of clarity, like so. And for the edges, all I'm going to do is just going to make that, press the Option key, so it goes to minus. Let's just have a look at the brush here. Bring the flow up a bit, and I'm just going to erase where that's overlapped into the background. Basically, I'm just refining the mask still. If we go over here, there we go. And the red on there is just this tab up here. I use it quite often. It indicates if something is clipping. And the shadows are the blue areas. So we can also erase that as well, because that is very dark in there. We're just erasing the mask, and same with this area here. There we go. So let's have a look at that. Okay, that's looking a little bit dark. So I'm just going to bring up the shadows ever so slightly, like so. And that's pretty much it. We can compare it to the original in the video. I think the original in the video, it looks a bit more infrared. It's a bit brighter, like so. This version has a bit more contrast, perhaps not quite as overexposed in some areas. So if we turn the mask off, and we just go into the tone curve here, we can bring up the mid-tones ever so slightly, just to make it a bit, or not really the mid-tones, the highlights up here. We don't want to do it too much because we don't want to blow out all these areas. And there we go. That's pretty much all I did. Same with this photograph here. As I look at this photograph, I actually liked the original file better than the cropped version. But I would do the same thing with this one. Very quickly, we'd go into the basic module here and just bring up the exposure. I'm looking at the foreground when I'm bringing up the exposure. I'm not too bothered about the background. And then the highlights we can bring down, and the whites, more the highlights than anything. The reason why I ended up doing this as more of a pano is because I wasn't really keen on this area here. You may recall, if you watched the video, there's a boardwalk there, and that's one of the reasons why they put a boardwalk in there, is because where there used to be foliage around the tree here, that is now gone because of people walking around the tree. So of course it's made this bare spot, which isn't ideal to look at as in a photograph. So that's why I ended up just turning it into a pano like that. All right, I'll upload the image that I processed. You're welcome to download it and give it a go. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please be sure to give me a thumbs up. That's always appreciated. And if you have any questions or suggestions, then I'm all ears. All right, thanks everybody. And until the next video, bye-bye.